All right, so the next fight, the main event, Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal. This is where I was supposed to say, I told you so. Jorge Masvidal won the fight. However, that is not what happened. That is not the way it went down. But I want to say that I feel very confident. I think I was very accurate with my predictions. So if you go back to the last video we posted, I think a lot of the things that I did say were relevant and very accurate. But there were a lot of variables that we couldn't count on. You know, you're talking about a guy who took the fight on 6 days' notice. Of course he's going to say he's in shape. Of course he's going to say he's training hard. Of course he's going to say, that the travel's not an issue, the COVID test is not an issue. But the reality is, I mean, like in my prediction, I didn't, all I said was Dustin Poirier said that he helped him train for his fight camp and that he sparred every round with Dustin Poirier and he was still in the gym. Of course, that's what Dustin's going to say too. He has his teammate. So that's all I went off on that, or went by on that. My prediction was based on just his previous fights, what he's done and where he's at today. And I think he proved that. I think, we saw the first round, Masvidal was very aggressive and he was very unorthodox with his striking. And he even did that switch left again that he did on Till. He was landing things. And I think throughout the fight, we saw that when he was landing those strikes, Usman didn't like it. We saw Usman run away a couple times and back off a couple times. He does not like combinations, and I still think that's a big hole in Usman's game. Is someone who's going to land and then continue to land. He doesn't like it. Now, can they knock him out? Time will tell. But I think that was where I thought Masvidal was going to be able to maximize his potential in that fight. And I think having a full fight camp, being more ready, not taking the fight on 6 days' notice, would have enabled him to do those things a little bit better. Would it have been enough to beat someone like Usman? I don't know. But it would have been what we saw in the first round for longer. And I think what we saw in the first round we liked as far as action goes. And definitely if you're a Masvidal fan and you were expecting to see him go out there and try and fight, you enjoyed watching that first round and how he came out. I would have enjoyed to have seen 2 or 3 rounds of that at least. And that's what I was expecting and that's what I was hoping, but that's not what I could have planned for. You never know, he's got a big fight. Of course, Masvidal is going to take it and it's a lot of money. It's a big fight. It's for a championship. Of course he's going to take it no matter how good a shape he's in. I think he was still in shape and I'm not trying to make excuses for him. I think he was in good shape and I think he was training. I'm not saying that's the reason he lost. I just feel like he could have done better if he didn't get tired and if Usman didn't play the game plan that he did. And that's credit to Usman. I think Usman did a fantastic job. I'm not biased to Masvidal. I've never even met Masvidal. If I did, it was just in passing. So I'm not like his friend or training partner or anything. I just picked him because looking at what he's been doing, where he's at, his mindset and all this stuff, I made my prediction and I still stand by it. But what we saw was him get a little bit tired, and that is completely understandable at 6 days' notice on a championship level against a guy who is probably one of the most diehard mental, strong training guys out there. I mean, we've seen him never get tired and push so hard and grind so hard, and he talks about his mental fortitude all the time, about how hard he trains and about that's why no one can beat me. So you have to believe the guys in the gym training crazy hard. So Masvidal put himself up against a really, really tough test for 6 days' notice. And I want to credit Usman on that. I'd rather see a fight. And when Masvidal has had those big fights like Nate Diaz, and many countless other fights of his 49 now previous fights, they fought. It was like a fight. And me, I'm a little more biased towards fighters than I am wrestlers and guys who just grind and try to get the win that way because I myself am a fighter too. I want to go out there and I want to fight. I understand there's wrestling involved. I understand that you have to get takedowns and go for submissions and there's all aspects of fighting. But I just hate from my career, I just hate when fighters would take me down and just hold me. And that would be how they thought fighting should be. It's the sport, and that's my fault for not being ready for those fights if I ended up losing any of those. And I think some I won, some I lost, but that's my fault. You can't blame the fighter for that. You can't blame Usman for his game plan. He was a grinder, and he fought how he had to fight to win the fight. But he also didn't land any significant punches that were going to knock Masvidal out. He had a hard time taking him down, which again showed how proficient Masvidal is against takedowns, how good his takedown defense is, and how good his clinch work is. He did really good in the clinch when he was strong, in the beginning when he had cardio. And then as his cardio went, he obviously got weaker, which Usman still didn't throw him around, didn't completely ragdoll him. He did get him to the ground. He did get the takedowns. But when he took him to the ground, Masvidal did a great job of tying him up. He didn't take much damage. The blood that was coming out of Masvidal's face was from 2 headbutts. So he didn't even land a strong enough elbow to cut him that I know of, that I saw, and that the commentators saw. We didn't see that. We didn't see any punches rock him. We didn't see any of the punishment that Usman promised that he was going to deliver, because, as I said in my prediction, I think he couldn't have really prepared for from what sounded to me like he couldn't have prepared for what Masvidal was going to bring, because Masvidal is way better on the ground, way better takedown defense, way better clinch than what most people believe. And I think Usman was one of those, and obviously so, because otherwise Usman would have landed a lot more, and he would have done what he said, and he would have smashed him out on the ground and beat him, finished him. Even BJJ, he did a good job. He was in mount position, Masvidal, and got out of that. He transitioned well. He did well with what he could. Usman didn't go for submissions. He didn't go for a knockout blow. He didn't seem to try to finish the fight at any point. He wanted to just grind him out and get the win. Hats off to him. I mean, that's the game. And you're going to think I'm biased on this because I'm negative to that type of fighting, but I'm not a news journalist. I'm not out here trying to be a sports analyst or anything, or some kind of like news commentator or anything. I'm just me, and so I can only give you my personal opinion, my insight as my experience being a fighter and what it's like. And I think obviously when fighters give breakdowns, recaps, and podcasts in general about fighting, they have something that no one else has, including the fans and the journalists and the reporters, because they've been in there and we've all fought. So we have our opinions. And I think that is what separates us. So I don't want to take away from that. And I want to hold true to that, and not try to be some biased reporter that doesn't share how I truly feel about things. And I think that it was probably really frustrating to have to be in that position where you got held down. And I think that when you see someone like Masvidal being the star that he is, and he's got a bigger following, and now obviously he's even bigger because of this fight than the champion, that's a big reason, because when these guys try to just hold you down and they grind, traditionally in history, they haven't become the most popular fighters. So it's kind of a give or take. Can he maintain his championship and be a champion and beat most of the people in the division, if not all of them at this stage? Maybe. And maybe that's his goal. Is he going to be the star that people are going to line up to watch because he's going to be crushing people and knocking them out? It depends. I mean, it depends on who he's fighting. If he's fighting a guy that's not like Masvidal, maybe he can get a knockout, and maybe he can get some other ways to win a fight. But I just wasn't a fan of this fight because I wanted it to be exciting. I mean, I was a fan of the fight as far as before and during and up until the very end, but I just now am not as satisfied, I guess, with the fight because I wanted it to be exciting. I wanted them to go out there and go to blows, and I wanted to see Usman tested more on being a fighter and taking blows and giving blows and then mixing it up and going for submissions and trying to finish it on the ground and working just a more wider range of options. But you know what? He did what he did, and he won. He's strong. He's dominant. He's got great cardio. He obviously has a great work ethic. And to his credit, he had to change up his game plan. Now, I want to say, too, from experience, I've trained with champions my whole life. My entire team was champions. I just not me. But, I trained alongside Cain Velasquez and Luke Rockhold and Josh Thompson and Daniel Cormier and Khabib and all the champions we had at AK. So I know how champions train, and I train with them for their whole careers, or a lot of their careers. And it's not as hard for a champion to change opponents as it is for someone coming into a championship fight like that, like Masvidal did on 6 days' notice, to fight a beast like him and to be prepared for that. A champion has to be ready for anybody at any time, and they have to train hard anytime. Does the game plan change when you fight, or when you're scheduled to fight someone like Gilbert Burns, and that changes over to Masvidal? Absolutely. But you got to be ready for that. And when you're training, you can't spend 3 months training for one person only. You have to still train for other aspects, because that makes you one-dimensional, right? You have to grow as a fighter. So at AKA, what we've always done was, when you had an opponent, yes, you train specifically for their strengths, but you're still always training for the other strengths that they might not even possess, because you got to stay strong and you got to be ready for that next bout. And if you train only for one opponent with just certain specifics, and then you get a new opponent next, you got to start over, and you're only going to have 2 or 3 months to train for that opponent. Whereas if you had to kind of train for everything for the first opponent, you're a little bit more well-rounded, a little bit more ready. So I think it was less of a big deal for him to change opponents, having a full fight camp, having a fight date, having an opponent change and all that, than it was for Masvidal. So there were a lot of variables that were just questionable in this fight, and I would love to see a fresh Masvidal rematch. I mean, I would, even though, it was a dominant victory, I agree. Usman dominated him. He did win. I think the first round was close, but I think it definitely, the last 4 rounds obviously was all Usman. But I would still love to see a very in shape, full fight camp Masvidal, who prepared specifically for Usman in the future. I would absolutely love to see that fight. And that's because we're seeing a very innovative Masvidal now. We're seeing a Masvidal that's training specifically for fighters, and he tried new things in this fight to try and catch Usman. You can tell he tried to strategize on 6 days' notice. So imagine if he had a full fight camp. He obviously did that with Askren. He did that with Nate. He did that with Till. I mean, he's a guy who's evolving and strategizing well. So I would definitely still like to see a very well-prepared fight between those two. And if Masvidal has to get a couple wins first, so be it. There's still a lot of other guys I'd love to see Masvidal fight. He's a star now. He doesn't need a belt. He's got the BMF belt. He doesn't need to fight for the championship. He's a main event fighter no matter who he fights, and there's a lot of great fights that he can get into. So either way it goes, I'm excited for him. I think he's going to grow. His legend's going to grow. His star power is going to grow either way. Usman's going to grow too. My advice would be try and finish more in the next one. Go for submissions. Try to go for some knockouts and mix it up a little bit. I get it that he was just trying to get this win because a loss to Masvidal on 6 days' notice would have been just detrimental to him as a fighter. So I get he had to be a little bit more desperate for those takedowns, but that's what it looked like. He was desperate. A champion shouldn't look desperate like that. And case in point, I'm going to give you an example from my team, and that's Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier is a wrestler. Daniel Cormier can beat anyone in the sport, in my opinion, including John Jones, if he went out there and wrestled him and just wrestled him to win the fight. I've said this many times. I believe it wholeheartedly. I think Daniel Cormier would have never been beat by any opponent in any fight that he's ever had he stuck to his wrestling and had the Usman style of, I'm going to do what it takes to win the fight. Daniel's not that way, however. Daniel's a fighter, and he wants to fight, and he goes out there to fight, which is why he's so popular, why he's as famous as he is, and why he's one of the best that's ever done it. And he wants to beat people with their own game. He's fighting Stipe coming up, and can he go out there and beat Stipe in a wrestling match, and especially in a 25-foot cage, and make it, I would say, somewhat look easy? Yes, I 100% agree with that. But I also agree he's probably not going to do that. He's going to go out there and fight, and especially since he knocked him out once before. So that's going to change everything. And Stipe is a beast. He is one of the best heavyweights of all time, and you can't give him anything. But I give mad respect to Daniel Cormier, and I think he's made a fabulous career for himself and established himself as a legend. He's a two division champion, pound for pound, one of the greatest to ever do it. And I think the reason is because he went out there and he was a true fighter and went for everything and always took advantage of any opportunity. And so I think that's the path I think Usman should follow if he wants that same greatness.